Hello fellow humans, this is my first ever unscripted video. So I thought about doing this for a while because I've seen that some unscripted videos may be as effective as those that have a script, have images and a lot of design. So we'll see how this goes. So I'd like to tell you a bit about myself, some channel updates, some ideas, trends, where I'm at the moment, what happens with this channel, what my plan is, and other goodies. I actually have 12 topics. My experience with activism, with degrowth, and what is the plan with that. I've been working with the Degrowth Collective for over 2 years now. So that's been an interesting experience, and I've learned a lot, and I've changed a lot of thinking about the effectiveness of activism. I've also co-founded with many other lovely folks the International Degrowth Network. That's still going strong, and I urge you to look it up and join. But as a personal lesson from my experience with activism, I think we are in a place, not just the degrowth movement, but activists in general, especially in these times with the fascists winning power, that we kind of have to reconsider strategy, learn more from the past, and maybe sit back and reassess a little bit. My thinking is that while the crisis is unavoidable, so it will happen at some point, we would only need to aim and hope that we are ready to take over. Considering that, and also the difficulties with electoral politics, can we get elected politicians? Can we get governments to implement a transition away from this capitalist madness? That seems difficult, right? So the idea was to focus on a bottom-up approach, try it, experiment it, advocate for it, that might eventually take us into the Overton window, which is the mainstream attention on what's most important in society. So this bottom-up approach includes citizen assemblies, includes the abolition of the elections, switching to a sortition-based electoral system where representatives are not selected from parties, rather they are elected at random from the general population. So considering that citizens' assemblies have been tried, there's over 250 experiments that have been tried already, and it's based on the oldest form of democracy that it's been tested in civilization. There's a hope, sure, it may be naive or not, that this may be the path towards liberation and towards some sort of systems change. So citizen assemblies, abolishing elections, switching to a sortition-based political system. Sortition means random selection of citizens, much like jury duties. So let's try that as a thought experiment. So that's where I'm at the moment with my thinking and my hopes. I'm trying to experiment with this strategy and see reactions and how it fits with the mood of the general population. And there's a positive mood that supports this kind of change. Recently, I've seen a study that degrowth has a lot of support in the United States. If you ask the right questions, the right people, yes, you will find support for degrowth. By the way, I'll put links in the description with some references. Number two, my employment situation is that I do this work full-time. I don't have a full-time job. I used to work in a corporate environment for 20 years. That's no longer happening. There's no money coming from that. I would prefer not to go back to make a living. And my hope is that I can help build a community where we can help each other build this kind of revolution. So there you go. All my money is coming from you, and I'm supported by my family to make a living for the time being. Number three, is YouTube working for this kind of mission? Well, I don't know. It hasn't so far. Like, this is still a small channel despite my efforts. I've tried turning on advertising, turning off. It doesn't make a difference. Thumbnails don't make much of a difference. Titles don't make much of a difference. Sure, they have to be good-ish, not outlandish, but this has still have to be okay, but they don't make a difference. What makes a difference is word of mouth, organic growth, and if you're lucky, a lot of outside help. There's a lot of YouTube channels that have a team in their productions, use money for PR work, and it shows in their numbers. Number two is that the algorithm promotes what monetizes the system. I don't monetize the video, so I don't draw the attention of the algorithm. Of course, this is a hypothesis. How do I know how the algorithm works? Do you know? Who knows? Maybe the folks at YouTube know, but not us. So not controlling the algorithm, again, a democratic deficit, doesn't help us with strategy. So what do I do now? What kind of format do I do to trick the algorithm? Nobody really knows. It's just trial and error. What also motivates me in staying on YouTube is that I haven't seen a channel or content that comes with a holistic approach to the crisis. Yeah, there is the great simplification. They do great work. But for my taste, I was looking to see a channel that talks about power structures in capitalism, property relations, the flow of capital, the ecological framework, the ideological debates, numbers, both in terms of inequalities and in terms of ecological footprints, materials, a bit of history, and maybe perhaps a bit of analysis about future paths. I haven't seen a channel that does all of this. This is my attempt with this channel to bring a more holistic approach. I think all elements that describe capitalism are important in understanding how the system works. So that's why I designed this model to give us a bigger picture. Number four, what is my story? Who am I actually? So I'm a 45-year-old dude, a Romanian guy, moved to Canada in 2005 because I could not adapt to the neoliberal culture that was emerging in Romania. It was too crazy for my taste, and I was hoping to find more civilization in Canada. I did to some extent, but it's still very neoliberal. So since 2005, I've been working full-time as a clerk at a financial company. I've been writing books, mostly fiction, because I love fiction. I love the English language. I published some of those books. I have a small family, and that's it. I'm not special. I was born into a middle-class family in Romania by Romanian standards. By these standards in North America would have been lower class. And I still think that I belong to the middle class to some extent, even though my income is suddenly gone. But yeah, that's it. I'm just a normal dude that does YouTube videos, writes essays, and does some activism. Number five, Robert Sapolsky and determinism. I love Robert Sapolsky. So after I read this book last year, it made me think about the importance of determinism in understanding the economy. So what is he talking about when he says that there's no free will? So he looks at the brain, looks at the studies from neuroscience, and says that in order for free will to exist, as we understand it today in using our common sense, that sensation that you are free to do whatever you want, you are the author of your thoughts, the author of your decisions, you can control your emotions. So that's the common understanding of free will. Sapolsky says that this has no basis whatsoever in reality, in how the brain is constructed. His argument is that in order for free will to exist, neurons would have to fire without a cause. There's no such thing as activity of neurons without a prior cause. Everything the brain does is caused by a prior event, which can go as far as ancient history passed on through culture and civilization, through norms and regulations, to your childhood, how you were raised, through the hormones that are flowing through your body, to the minutes before you made a decision that may be influenced by your state of hunger or your state of being tired or not, and even to milliseconds before you made a decision, which may be influenced by stimuli of which you are not aware. So free will requires absence of causality. Some authors say that it's an illusion, that it doesn't really exist. Others think that free will is compatible with determinism. Everything is caused is actually compatible with our sensation of free will. And in the end, we are the authors of our decisions. They are the compatibilists. Now, I'm a hard determinist. I fall in the Sapolsky camp. But I still think we can operate as if we had free will. We still operate with the moral code. We are still mindful of the consequences of our decisions. All these matter, even if they have a cause, even if there's no author in our brain that pulls all the strings. Now, considering all this, we may develop some sort of thinking about how the moral code that underpins capitalism works. And it's usually focused on this idea of merit, the idea of profit accumulation. Merit is an extension of the free will. So you assume that you have free will, meaning that if you work hard, if you're lucky, if you whatever, you deserve the rewards of your work. That's merit, that's meritocracy. But it assumes free will. Everything hinges on this assumption. If you take away this assumption, the whole moral foundation of capitalism crumbles. I say the moral foundation, not the material foundation. So, okay, Ingrid Robbins talks about militarism, which is this idea that on principle, philosophically speaking, we should be able to have a conversation about putting limits on wealth as a principle. If we add determinism to the mix, it makes the case for limits even stronger. So if no rewards are warranted from a moral perspective, right, because nobody is responsible for their action, everything is consequence, connection, relation, luck. In that sense, infinite wealth accumulation is an empty moral universe. This is a strong statement. This is a strong philosophical position, but it is important because if neuroscience makes the case that we are fully determined, it hasn't been disproven, and I don't think it can be disproven. There have been attempts. Go and check the book. It is time to talk about the moral code of capitalism. It is time to reconsider merit. So what do we put instead of it? That's where the conversation has to happen. Now, there are solutions. There's conversations about the moral system that can replace capitalism. It has to talk about egalitarianism. It has to talk about the uniqueness of each individual. It has to recognize that our lives are finite. It has to recognize that the system, society, nature, all function within limits, hard limits, physical limits. And I even argued in a video that there's no such thing as infinite anything in nature. There's no such thing as practical infinities. So that puts pressure on civilization and on the moral code and on our imagination that, okay, you cannot have infinite wealth. You cannot expand your imagination over the well-being of other humans. So this idea, determinism versus the economy, is a strong and very important topic. Everything else flows from this, including the conversations about the financial system, about how money flows between banks, between financial markets, investors, pension funds, private individuals, and corporations. It hinges on these moral principles. Segue to point number 6, MMT, modern monetary theory. This movie, Finding the Money, talks about modern monetary theory in detail, presents the concept, presents the understanding of the financial system. I think MMT deserves even more attention. I think it's a hot topic. Why is that? A lot of economists, commentators, even on the left, even progressives, do not understand the importance of the MMT angle over the financial system. I've seen YouTubers providing financial analysis all from the angle of capitalism, even when they advocate for reducing inequalities. Yes, that is great, but MMT gives you the full explanation of how the system works. So, in principle, MMT says that when we talk about the government's fiscal deficit or the government budget, that deficit is the economic surplus of agents, of us. That surplus is our deficit. The state's deficit is the private sector's surplus. And the opposite is also true. The state's surplus is the private sector deficit. So it doesn't mean that when a government has a budget surplus is a good thing for the economy. It means that they are spending less than what they collect in income. And of course, the reverse is also true. MMT is important for understanding that governments can spend as much as necessary for the reconstruction of the economy, for increasing the minimum wage, for building infrastructure, for education and healthcare, for anything that is needed for the transition away from fossil fuels to the green energy. So again, they can spend as much as they want as long as there is an economic capacity to do so. And by that I mean enough workers, enough resources to do the work, of course, and enough know-how. If you have all that, there is money to do it. Inflation happens when this capacity of production doesn't match with the amount of money that is sitting in the economy. If there's more money than the capacity to absorb it, you get inflation. So that spending cannot be infinite, as MMT recognizes, but it can be done. And the limit to that spending should be the capacity of the economy to absorb it and to do the work. So don't believe the lies that you hear or the misrepresentation that, oh, the government has to decrease the deficit or the economy goes bust. It's not true. If there's enough labor to do the necessary work, the money can be spent. Number 7, electoral politics and revenge thinking. I do not believe in electoral politics anymore. This is what I mean by abolishing elections. When we talk about having a different political system, I talk about phasing out elections as we understand them and political parties as we understand them. I see political parties just as middlemen in this process. They are the medium for groupthink. They are the medium for polarization. They're just an unnecessary layer between the citizens and the government. And there's a way to have democracy without this layer of middlemen that overspends, is corrupt, has lost the trust of citizens, and does not respect the will of the people. How often do we get political parties elected? We get them into power on a list of promises, and they do not deliver. And moreover, we cannot hold them accountable because once they get power, they have essentially unlimited power to do whatever they want, and they will suffer the consequences only at the next election. During those 4 years, they operate with the passive consent of the electorate. We cannot tell them what to do during those 4 years unless we start a supermassive general strike to get their attention and force governments to reverse policy. So it has to be a super heavy popular pressure for governments to do something after they are elected. And many elections this year, in the past 7 years, have been done as a revenge against who has been in power until then. It's universal disenchantment and unhappiness with the system of elections itself. People don't care as much about their political party as they care about having their needs addressed. This is why a lot of people switch parties in elections. Should you not be committed to a party if you align with their ideology? What makes you change your mind? It's the fact that that party did not deliver once they were in government. So the system is rotten, is corrupt. And there's a better way to do it without election, with direct democracy. Sortition, legislature by lot, citizens selected at random. Next, my expectations for the future. If we want to do all these changes, if we at least want to hope for some sort of revolution and some transition away from capitalism, pro-social thinking is the only way to go. That means if everyone who's aligned to some extent against capitalism, against the inequalities in the system, would have to come together in some shape or form to coordinate, to build synergy and do things together. This means compromising on narratives, compromising on strategy, and sometimes even compromising on the shape of the action. In terms of organizing, some good lessons from my experience come from sociocracy and sortition, again, sortition. And I think if these two systems are combined and some enlightened rich people put the money in the right place to help the causes, a lot of good things can happen. So organizations that move away from hierarchies, they are decentralized, flat, collaborate as equals, and have some funding, they would be the best way to organize for the transformation. And I'm hoping to develop these ideas as we progress with this channel. What am I thinking right now? Right now, I think about the sustainability class. I just read this book. It's awesome. It's great. You all have to read it. Here's a quote from the book. Say you have a bathtub that's about to overflow. Would you put some buckets on the floor to catch the overflow, or would you turn off the tap? For many, innovation is about adding more buckets. We spend our lives devising more ingenious ways to keep the whole charade going. Innovation has come to be about devising expert policies that often generate unintended problems that are worse than the original problem. This is what it's all about. Technology and innovation, sustainability thinking cannot save us if we do not talk about the fundamentals: inequality, power, limits. It's not enough pretend to live a sustainable lifestyle if the consequences of your lifestyle are completely neglected. All the talk about sustainability, it's almost irrelevant if we do not look at the entire picture, which is the entire process, the entire life cycle of all the stuff that we use in our life, that we buy, that we throw away, from the point of origin in the mines in the global south, all the way through the chain up to our house. The entire chain matters. And even after we use the stuff or the service that we produce, we must also consider the consequences of waste. If we take the plane, the emissions are important. If we buy on Amazon for cheap, it matters where the product was made, how much the worker was paid. I will wrap up now my first unscripted video. This is when you, the viewer, are so important. We are trying to build an alternative to capitalism, an alternative economic system that is not based on profit, but is based on well-being. Subscribing, sharing helps with the algorithm, because the algorithm tends to favor what's already popular. Only together we can win and get the attention of the ruling class. Until next time, be well and increase the peace.
Whoever has this has the power to override their whole system.
I need to get to Elysium.
We're gonna break into the most heavily guarded place in the universe.